one, I don't know how, but I can find out how. And I'm willing to do it. Okay. And finally, acknowledging that when you're comparing yourself with others, you're comparing your deep feelings with what others have presented. Now, it's such a lie. When people present, now I know, you're looking at me and you're wondering, you of other people suffering from imposter syndrome? This is my presentation. It is what I'm presenting. You don't know my deep feelings. You understand? So you can't compare yourself with Eunice that you're seeing this presentation. So get over comparing yourself with other people, because what you see is a show. What is inside is different. And for me, is just more of know who you are. Don't create your identity based on the people around you. Don't be like Gideon, saying that I come from a poor background, and therefore I cannot deliver my people from the Midianites. So this is a journey that I'm doing, and I'm learning to accept that, Eunice, when God has given you a responsibility, and I can tell you, in 2022, I began another business called 20X Entrepreneur. This is one of the business that I've learned to let go, and I have no attachment to failure or success of it, because I learned that the fear of, what if I fail, was holding me back. And I think this is one of the businesses that is thriving, and I'm also surprised. I'm learning to celebrate that I am part of it. Many times I'm tempted to say, no, it's other people, it's something else. So thank you very much. I know I've taken more than 10 minutes. I'm sorry about that.
Wow, that was so insightful. One of the things that I've picked from what Eunice has just shared is don't compare yourself so as to create your identity. You already have an identity. And she mentioned in Jeremiah, God knew us even before we were born. So you already have an identity, and you don't have to compare yourself with any other person. Another thing that she mentioned, just like kind of like the imposter syndrome is a feeling. It's just a feeling that we feel like we are not enough. So Eunice has also mentioned it's a feeling of feeling like you're not being enough. And then she's mentioned one of the techniques to just put it down is celebrate yourself. Like just coming to this meeting and joining in this meeting today, ladies and gentlemen, you need to celebrate yourself that you're here, you're learning something. So celebrate yourself, look back at your achievements, no matter how minute they are, and just clap and celebrate yourself. Such an insightful talk there by Eunice Maina. And our next speaker, allow me introduce to you our next speaker. Our next speaker, I like referring her on a personal level after reading what she's done. So I would like to refer her like a finance guru in one way or another. This is Rose Kemboi. Is a finance leader with 19 years work experience spanning across professional services. She has expert understanding of investor relations, commercial strategy, and execution, taxation, management, governance, finance operations, and building high-performing teams. She is experienced in managing companies operating across East, Central, and West African regions. She has a proven track record of analysis, support, and execution of financial and operations strategies across domestic and international environments. Rose has a strong finance acumen that supports decision-making and business strategy. Stellar communication skills with passion for reaching business and financial goals. She is highly collaborative with deep experience, balancing and prioritizing competing needs and navigating complex environments to deliver value for businesses as a key business partner to executive, commercial, and operational teams. Rose holds a master's degree in finance from University of Leicester and a Bachelor of Commerce degree from Strathmore University. She is a fellow of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, an active member of Association of Women Accountants of Kenya, and a member of Women on Boards Network Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me invite or bring to you Rose Kemboi. Welcome, Rose. Give us your talk on imposter syndrome.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you, Rose.
Fantastic. So we learn every day. I've really enjoyed the presentation by both Eunice and Lina. So I think as we seek to share our knowledge, we actually also get the privilege to learn. So that's really fantastic. Let me just go to the beginning of sort of when people, there must have been people who had experienced it then, but this imposter syndrome was researched very extensively and actually sort of given that name by two psychologists. Back in 1978, there's Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. And interestingly, they noted that it was very common among high-achieving women, they just believed they were not as intelligent, and they always, like what Eunice said, or even Lina, they attributed their success to something else other than their ability. And it's interesting that in our own personal experiences, that's actually what we, like for me, a few times when I felt like, I was in that season, it was probably at a time when I was in this peak of something, but instead of feeling confident, energized, and raring to go, I had these second thoughts of, my goodness, is it really happening? So it sort of started then. And there's a very interesting quote attributed to this one of the psychologists, Pauline. She said, it's very crucial to understand that these imposter feelings are not a reflection of reality. Yeah. And I think Lina said it very well, but a reflection of internalized beliefs and feelings. Yeah. So I think acknowledging that for everyone, when you find yourself in it, is a very important first step to overcoming it. Yeah. And, like Eunice has said, this is so common. It's actually, while it's sort of common among women, it's also with men. And a study by the International Journal of Behavioral Science estimated that 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. 70% is a very high percentage, right? And it's true that while initially it was thought to be more women, men actually experience it in comparable rates. However, I guess we talk about women and it shows that it could be a lot more widespread among women. And it just comes back to biases that are there and that we would do very well to make sure we are not part of. Now, I don't know how many people here read this, the Lean In book by by the former COO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg. Even if I forgot anything a lot about that book, I'll never forget about the Heidi Howard study. I don't know who remembers. It was a case study within there, and it was talking about a study done by professors at Columbia Business School. And they were just sort of experimenting to test the perceptions of men and women in the workplace. So they gave students a case study of a real life entrepreneur named Heidi Rosen, and then they're describing how she became successful by using her outgoing personality, vast personal and professional network, and included many of the most powerful business leaders in the technology sector. Now, the male version of that was called Howard. Now, when the students were asked to rate, they actually found both of them were competent, but Howard came across as more appealing. Howard is the man. Heidi, on the other hand, was seen as selfish, not the type of person you'd want to work or hire for. And the insight for that was, even with identical qualifications and behaviors, they can still be perceived differently based solely on gender. This is a very small representation of what we know is very widespread, even in our own traditional settings, or even in our urban settings. And I dare say that probably then contributes to this being even more widespread among women because of such double standards, right? So it's true, affects everyone. But I think, those issues then make it a lot more widespread among women. I think Eunice is a very good case study of because also other researchers have shown that there are 3 key groups that actually find this even more. One of them is high achievers. And if we all stop and think, when have I felt this? Lina said it well. You are probably in this high stakes meeting with the who is who of either your industry or your company, and you want to raise that hand to contribute, and then you feel afraid. You wonder, what will all these people think about me? Am I even worth raising my hand in such a high stakes setup? You're a high achiever. Just accept it, right? And it was actually found that it's very prevalent, right? So I think sometimes if you feel it's sort of creeping in, sorry, oh, there's someone who, okay. If you feel like it's creeping in, you're probably doing something extremely right, and you just need to sort of manage it. It was also common among the minority groups, or what you call underrepresented groups. And obviously, women in the corporate setup have been very underrepresented. And I think a lot of companies, a lot of groups are doing a lot in that space, trying to increase the representation of women in the boardroom, trying to increase the representation of the women in senior leadership, trying to increase the representation of women even in the pipeline, building that pipeline to senior leadership. What I found interesting is that apparently it's also very common with students and early career professionals. And I think it's just when someone is trying to find that footing, obviously choices are quite, do I go this way or the other? So just knowing what are some of the key points in time when that comes. Like for me personally, when I've experienced it, there might have been very many points, but probably it's at that high achiever stage. When I remember when we published the book, when we launched volume 3, and there was this very positive reception in my network. Some of the very senior leadership teams reaching out to me, and I actually got afraid. I was like, my goodness, is this actually coming through? And I then realized that I was doing the opposite. Instead of celebrating it and going at it, I was really doubting a lot. And I discovered it very quickly. And I remember talking to especially my former line manager, I worked with several years ago, and he told me, Rose, the Rose I know cannot be sort of facing that, yeah. And then I also decided to use avenues that we have. So among them is we even have an employer supported program of counselors, and I remember going to one. And then after a lot of conversations, then we also realized that some of this was coming through very unrealistic expectations, right? Setting very, very high standards, and not accepting 95% of the outcome. Yeah, if the outcome is 95% of the 100, then feeling like, no, the 5%, failing on the 5% is making me not good enough, or a failure, or this, I didn't deliver, I needed 100 and nothing less. And so I think that high achiever part and very unrealistic expectations is very real. And I think Eunice has covered very well some of those symptoms and manifestations. And I'm someone who really reminds people these days, you know, if I'm giving someone a compliment and then they're sort of brushing it away. I remember recently I was working with someone and he delivered really well. And when he was being given compliments, he was sort of looking the other way and indicating something like, yeah, you know, this is not really me. Then and I was just reminding them, you know, take the compliments. You did a good job, learn from it, and also move forward. Yeah. You know, and I think also the other thing is fear of judgment. Yeah. Where you're thinking, are those people thinking I'm actually this competent? For example, right? Perfectionism is something else. I think one of the things I've learned is, you know, everyone expects a chart like this when going up, right? Like everything works after the other. You're building on one success after another success. And then you actually, in reality, life is non-linear, right? Life is non-linear and it's not just momentum after momentum. There'll actually be dips and then there'll be highs. But the nice thing is, as long as you're consistent and persistent, overall, it will still be, if you normalize that chart, okay, I'm a finance person, so if I'm making it two sort of two numbers and etc, excuse me. So there'll be dips and there'll be highs, but if you normalize that chart, it will actually go that way, but it cannot be that way in experience, right? And what I also realized about this imposter syndrome is, if someone is not then careful, you don't go into this mode of overworking, right? Trying to compensate for those feelings of inadequacy. You're working excessively so hard to avoid anyone discovering you as incompetent, if so. And you know why then you need to combat and really learn when to identify and deal with imposter syndrome is because you know that overworking is not sustainable and it may not work actually in the long term, right? Because you end up prioritizing very important areas like your health, your family, and we've had a few unfortunate cases. I don't know if to say a few, or let me say some unfortunate cases where even young people then going into that overdrive, then at some point they take comfort in drugs, right? Trying to compensate for that. And so that's why it's very important to deal with that. And it's very important, and us also recognize with someone on mute. Sorry. Okay, that was Lillian. Okay, thank you. So and you know, if you look at a lot of quotes associated with imposter syndrome, even when Michelle Obama, for example, said once, she still has a little imposter syndrome where she feels like it doesn't just go away. That feeling that you shouldn't take me that seriously. What do I know? So we may also not expect to be 100% free of it, but I think the main thing is how do we actually manage it? I think the other thing to note is just what actually causes it. So other than the individual factors we've talked about, for me, one of the things I really recognize being a member of a family, having kids that I take care of, our approach can build confidence and therefore help people to deal with imposter syndrome well, or diminish it, meaning that we are setting them up to fail in case they encounter you know, the imposter syndrome. So I think knowing that we are part of a lot of environments and we need to do our part in building confidence, you know, giving that reassurance, but also building strength is very very important. And there are a lot of strategies for overcoming imposter syndrome. There are actually a lot of books as well. And I think just building that strength in yourself, you know, self-acceptance, acknowledge your reality. Like for me, when I identified it, I quickly said, you know what, I want to deal with this because I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. How will I come out of it, right? So, and also I think having that growth mindset, knowing that I may find myself in this situation, but I can actually come out of it. It's within my power. That's very key. For those of us who are mentors and who are part of support networks, being there to actually support is very important, right? If you're also a leader, especially in an organization, supporting the growing talent in educational workshops is very important. Promoting a positive work culture is very important. Self-awareness and mindfulness is very important. Develop capacity to self-evaluate and know when you're going off tangent, right? And just be able to find yourself back up there. And I think in summary, I think it's imposter syndrome is a really pervasive issue. Like we've said, if 70% of the people in a lot of researches are affected, that tells you it's very much there. It affects the greats, it affects very successful people, it affects young people, it affects people in families, etc. And I think just awareness around the adverse impacts that hinder personal growth, professional growth is important, acknowledging that. And then understanding the causes and effects, very important, because then when you understand that, then you're able to build strategies to combat it, or at least to deal with it and not allow it to take you down. And I think being able to manage it means that now you can unlock that potential, achieve that genuine self-confidence, and address things timely so that you can you can sustain your momentum and your growth. Thank you very much.
Wow. Such good insights there. One thing I've picked from Rose, it is within our power to come out of imposter syndrome. We are going to the next session of questions and answers. And most of the questions that I had, they've already been answered. Like how to handle it. You find an answer like celebrate yourself, count your wins, know your identity. It is within your power. And I will ask this one question, and this question goes to Lina Jamwa. Can imposter syndrome be projected onto an individual by others? And if so, what are the mechanisms and effects of this projected imposter syndrome? Can imposter syndrome be projected onto an individual by others? And if so, what are the mechanisms and effects of this projected imposter syndrome?
Okay, yes, Elizabeth, it can be projected onto someone by others. What happens is, when people give comments, for example, let's say you're in business, you've gotten this big tender, and you tell your friends that you've gotten this big tender, and they ask you, utaweza kweli? Or will you be able to handle that? Okay, that in itself can actually make you doubt yourself, because you feel like maybe they see something that you are not seeing. But yeah, just the way you would work on any other mental state in terms of mental, personally induced imposter syndrome, is the same way you'd work on it. I say, for one, just affirm yourself, tell yourself every second of the minute of the hour that you're able to do it. Remember that you are there because you are meant to be there. You got it because you're able to deliver in that role. Yeah, and to do it, just go ahead and do it. Develop your strategy and go ahead and just do it. Yeah, so yes, it can be actually instigated by other people. And yes, it is still possible to overcome it, because at the end of it all, what I say, it's all in the mind. Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth.
Wow, thank you. My next question goes to Eunice Maina. Is imposter syndrome primarily influenced by nature, that is genetics per se, or nurture, environment, or upbringing? And can it be considered a disability or a temporary stage that one can outgrow? Is imposter syndrome primarily influenced by nurture or nature? And can it be considered a disability or a temporary stage that one can outgrow?
Thank you, Elizabeth, for that. I honestly don't think that it's genetic. It cannot be genetic. No one is born an imposter, feeling that way. However, I think it can be, come from the environment where we grow up in, especially if you're born in very high performance environment, whereby only when you perform, you are awarded. And when you don't perform, you're nobody. So you're always constantly seeking this performance, but not feeling really like you have, because the demands, the standards are so high that you can meet them. And especially if you're a firstborn, like me, whereby I remember if my siblings did any mistake, it was my mistake. So you can imagine I'm raising these kids who are making mistakes, but I'm the one to be beaten for their mistakes. So you're always constantly worried of, am I enough? Can I really do this? Yeah, so environmental, but it is temporary. As Rose has said, this is not a permanent, it's not a disability. However, if you don't acknowledge, you're not self-aware, it can actually disable you. So it's not permanent. It can be, we can work on it. And Lina has given tips on how to work on it. Rose has also given those tips on how to work on it so that you get over it. And if it is a traumatic event that happened, it is okay to get, therapy, so that I didn't do therapy per se, but I had to enroll to a program that helped me understand how the environment I grew up in affected how I, this imposter syndrome that I had. And that awareness alone helps you sort it out. Or rather, you start on a journey to getting over it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. My next question goes to Rose. Rose has spoken about organizations supporting their employees so that they don't fall into depression. Rose, in what ways can cultural and organizational beliefs within an environment contribute to the development or exacerbation of imposter syndrome? In what ways can cultural and organizational beliefs within an environment contribute to the development or exacerbation of imposter syndrome?
Okay, so going back to what imposter syndrome is, and we said it's basically, individual doubting their accomplishments and having that persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite evidence of their competence. Now, so I think here are ways that, for example, in an organizational setting, you can, build, you can, let me first say exacerbate, because the primary aim should basically be, how do you build confidence in people, and therefore combat this. Now, some of the corporate gurus have usually said, you'd rather have a really good boss than have a really good company. Yeah, sometimes. And I think it's for reasons like this. Because, for example, if you're a leader, you're working with a team. That team spends significant amount of productive hours every day with you. Now, as these people learn, you're basically either building their confidence and their competence, or you're actually destroying it, or you're not helping them to grow. So I think one of the ways is basically looking at line management. Like if you're managing people, then lead people in a humane way. And humane way is basically building them up, acknowledging them, celebrating their successes, correcting them in a humane way again. And I think it will not be a random occurrence. It has to be a culture built in an organization where you know that the organization generally builds that confidence. There's something I posted, I think 2 days ago in my LinkedIn profile, and I posted about vulnerability. And I said, I think there's nothing as powerful as a manager making a team feel like everyone is part of solutions for any problem that comes up. And running away from this know-it-all stance, because I'm a manager, because I'm a leader, I know everything, so the solutions come from me. And I call it's called vulnerability. Even a leader acknowledging when they don't know. So I think in such environments where the leaders are even vulnerable and are basically pushing the team, saying we are all, you're here because you should be here. You have the competence, you have the solutions that we need. Let's all think this through. I can still lead the process of identifying the solutions, but we should all be part of the the solutions. And I also dare say such environments are where people feel safe to experiment, to propose ideas, to they feel psychologically safe. They don't feel like I could propose this, then someone comes for me in another way, because that way then people, like Lina said at the beginning, when you're in that meeting, even if with very senior teams, the people still feel free to raise their hands and actually air their views. So I think culture and environment and even people leadership is can play a very big role in actually ensuring that this imposter syndrome doesn't become a thing of a very common thing in our work environment. And of course the opposite applies in terms of what can actually cause such an issue in a big way in a working environment where people are not supportive, people are victimized for their ideas, people are supposed to look for this all-powerful leader or line manager for solutions. They don't feel people are appreciated or treated in a humane way. Yeah. So I think that's very true. And I also say I think it's good to learn. And then the cultural aspect of it. So I think we all, bear that responsibility to build cultures in organizations. But if you're applying it to the wider society, I think we still obviously have a lot of cultural issues that can lead to this. But I think a lot of us are also aware of those. For example, cultural issues that expect a man to be this very, very strong, not vulnerable, and then expect women to be, even in a professional setup, take the sort of women sort of roles. And I think such issues are still there. But I think then understanding this and identifying those and dealing with them in a constructive way. Let me say that, in a constructive way, because there are ways to deal with issues. There are constructive ways and non-constructive ways. So I think identifying them and dealing with them in a constructive way should still be part of alleviating this issue. Elizabeth?
Wow, thank you. Just being humane in a working environment is key. There is a question from one of the people who have logged in. How do one deal with toxic line manager or boss in work environment? How do you deal with toxic line manager or boss in work environment? Rose, Eunice, or Lina, one of you can pick the question.
Okay, if no one is going, I can go. So I think one of the very helpful ways is I think first of all, I always really advocate for self-awareness. So you start with yourself. I think you really need to build mental toughness, awareness of what you can do, what you're capable of doing. Number two is, I think, emotional intelligence, knowing how to handle the difficult situations, knowing how to handle difficult conversations. And then number three, I think, situational awareness, knowing your company, knowing your boss, and sort of trying to at least play to your strengths in terms of managing them. And I think when you've done all that and you still have a situation where that's not enough to deal with these issues, I think then understanding what avenues you have within that company to be able to bring bring to the fore the issues that come up. When you say toxic line manager, I'm sure there are specific issues, probably lack of acknowledgement of the work you do, overworking, or lack of delegation. So knowing the avenues available to seek support or to bring that to relevant leadership is important. And hopefully the culture of that organization is supportive of that. But also where the culture is not supportive, then I know there is always now the last resort. And you know what that last resort is, which is that you definitely want to look for an environment that nurtures you and that appreciates your 100%, and that also accepts you being part of what is shaping that environment. So, and I think that's why there was a research done by ACCA recently, and one of the things that was found out was, for example, that a lot of companies that have diversity initiatives, a lot of professionals look for companies with diversity initiatives. What does that mean? That the market is actually shifting, and any employer who is serious about high performance should also shift in response. So I think we can all shape that market, but it's a multifaceted. It starts with you, goes to the environment, goes to understanding them, and also goes to being able to manage complexity, and then of course that last resort. But I would like the rest of the team to probably build on that.
Thank you, Rose, for that. I think it basically sums it up. But what I would add is probably also considering to have a candid discussion with the manager. And you have to be aware this may go two ways. Sometimes the manager maybe is not aware that they're being toxic. So this may go either on the side where they understand and they become supportive by changing, or they become worse or ignore you. Okay, so you have to be ready for that, and also just draw your boundaries. Just line up your boundaries quite well, and just know this is where I will allow people to get to me, and when it reaches here, I cannot support that. The beauty of working in the industries right now, most laws are quite open and quite supportive of the work environment, and most companies are even very aware. Like Rose is saying, if they're looking at diversity and everything, most companies are quite aware of employee, let me not call them rights, but nurturing an employee all round. Because it's not just the olden days where it was, your line manager was, his or her word was law, but right now you have to incorporate a lot. Even as a manager or as the CEO or anything, you have to be very sensitive to how the staff react to things. So, and the staff are actually even empowered to talk a lot on what they feel does not work for them. So speaking out and basically drawing lines, boundaries. Somebody should not call you at 10 p.m. when you're in your house to make noise at you. Yeah, somebody should not, just mishandle you as if you're somebody who cannot think on their own, micromanaging and everything. I know it might be tough sometimes to even raise these things, but it pays off. But just be ready for those two eventualities, either acceptance and change, or ignoring and maybe retaliating or something like that. Yeah, thank you.
Lena, before you go, I want you to there is a comment here, and I want to put it as a question, and I want your thoughts on it.
Yes.
She's talking about leaders should move away from being transactional to relational. Can this build someone's confidence? Understanding that most of the leaders and most of companies are in for business. Yeah. So this is a transactional, like kind of an agreement whereby you give your services, I pay you. So she's recommending that leaders should move away from being transactional to relational. Can this really build someone's confidence? Your comments on that?
Yes. It can actually build somebody's confidence. You see, when you're transactional, you don't care what happens to this person beyond the office and beyond the work being delivered. But when you're relational, you care about this person's well-being. So, for example, somebody comes to you and tells you, I have a mental health issue. How can you support me? You see, if you're transactional, you may just brush them away. I mean, it doesn't really matter. You deal with yourself. But when you're relational, you will know how to handle this person and even maybe throw them to the right direction in terms of seeking help and things like that. Yeah? So it's very, very important that leaders change their mindset from being transactional to relational, because that is the only way you can nurture the current career person generally. Yeah? We have Gen Zs who are now working, and I mean, millennials and Gen Zs, and I can assure you, they're not like baby boomers who are yes and amen in most of the things. People are very informed, and they are very, very, very demanding in terms of how you handle them and how you treat them nowadays. So you also have to look at that. And I mean, it's just basic human instinct to be relational. I mean, if you're just transactional, you'll also lose the support of your team eventually. Yeah, because I mean, if they don't feel you, if you don't feel them, they won't feel you as well. So when you need that backup and you need people to hold you up, you will not have people to actually hold you up. You will lose them. Yeah, so it's very important for leaders to be relational. I agree.
Thank you, Lena. Now, to Eunice, you mentioned that most of the times you could just speak out your imposter syndrome to your husband. Someone is asking about, can a spouse contribute to developing the syndrome? When you felt like you're not enough, you mentioned to us that you used to share with your husband, I feel like I've failed. Can someone really, can a spouse really make someone feel not enough, or can they trigger the imposter syndrome in them?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, you know, spouse, bosses, parents, sisters and brothers are part of this environment that contribute to this syndrome. And yes, a spouse could actually, I mean, you could have a spouse who is always looking at the wrong side, yani what you cannot do, but they don't see the good things that you do. And it's an unfortunate situation. But I believe that you can find a way to remain steadfast. And this is through self-awareness, you know, and what Rose was talking about, emotional intelligence, situational, you know, awareness, because of course, a boss, you leave them at work, but you realize we spend more time at work than even at home. So as much as it's a similar situation, only that this one now you're too close and that moment comes. So being self-aware is a very important part, so that even when they tell you that you can't, you know deeply that you can, because you have done the work. You've done the inner work of knowing what you can and what you cannot. Yeah, just to add on to the other issue of toxic work environment. I left corporate many years ago, so I mean, and I'll talk now as a business owner. And one thing that I've learned is that human beings have similar needs, and these have been taught by my friend Irene, that we have 3 basic needs: to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood. Now, whether you're a boss, whether you're a business owner, whether you're an employee, we are all seeking the same thing. I know in primary school, we were told that the basic needs are food, shelter, and clothing. Now imagine you have food, shelter, and clothing, because now we are beyond basic, those ones, and nobody sees you. Why do we even dress up? So that people can see us, you know? We dress up because we want to look a certain way. If nobody hears you, you're still struggling. You actually can starve to death because of nobody seeing you. Now, my observation, people become toxic when they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard and understood. Now, whether it is your boss, whether it is your spouse, that is all what they're seeking. So maybe what you could ask is, in what way do they want to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood? But unfortunately, all of us, are living in fear, obligation, and guilt. So now we get to workplace with our fog. So you get to workplace, you're full of fear. You can't be able to face the boss and say, look, boss, I see, I notice that when I do this, you behave like this. In what way would you want me to help you feel better? I know it's a very difficult conversation, but I'll be very happy to see someone come up to share that kind of a conversation. But because all of us are full of fear and obligation, because you're there to work and deliver and go. Because as much as Lina has said that leaders need to be not transactional, the other one, relational. Are employees relational? Or they're also transactional when they go to work? Because we go to work, we're like, I have this job, I need to deliver. This is my job description. I cannot do beyond here. So you stop being relational, but you want your boss to be relational. So as Lina has said, it is basic human that we all get off these transactional issues, whether it is at work or parenting or with our spouses. Let's realize that we have, all of us, we want the same thing. Now, in sales, when we are training in sales, we say that everybody listens to one FM station, which is called What Is In It For Me. I don't know whether you guys have had that FM station. I know you hear classic and all, but What Is In It For Me is what all of us are listening to. The boss wants something. Do you know what they want? Because for them to behave in a certain way, they're not getting what they want. Now, the employee wants something. What do they want? And I say, for employers, people come to your workplace because they want something. Please find out what it is in it for them. And so that when you give what is in it for the other person, you will definitely get what is in it for you. So it's both way. It's two way. You may be busy demonizing your boss, but Kube, you're the toxic employee in that environment. Just my opinion.
Wow, some good insights there. Again, human beings have similar needs. There is another question in here. How can one genuinely care for the other team members and keep them motivated and boost their confidence aside from being there for them? How can one genuinely care for the other team members and keep them motivated and boost their confidence aside from being there for them? This goes to you, Rose Kemboi.
Okay, thank you. So I think it sort of comes back to the same. So and I think the very start of it is just what kind of work environment do you actually create? What kind of a team member, and I know Eunice touched a bit on that, what kind of a team member are we? If we are leaders, what kind of leaders are we? Do we lead with humanness? Do we collaborate? Do we also act relational as opposed to just transactional? Do we act with emotional intelligence? Yeah. And for example, there are a number of things about being a good team member. So it first of all holding your inch. What are you responsible for? Are you holding that? Are you collaborative in things that touch on others? Yeah, that are not just for you, but also touch on other people. Are you collaborative? Do you share knowledge? Do you if for example you manage people, these days you don't, there's no directing and commanding. You actually coach people. You help them understand why they should do things the way they should do. Yeah. So it's now more coaching than any other approach to managing teams. And then again, speaking up and giving feedback. Yeah. Sometimes you expect people to read our minds. So speaking up and giving feedback where people are going wrong, where people are doing well, appreciating them, and supporting them. Yeah. So it's a whole mix. And again, it's more complex. It's not just simple, but it's also not too complex. It's manageable. But someone has to have this big picture view of what kind of work environment do I want? and then you sort of you help create that environment. Yeah. So I think then it's a mix of all those. Hold your inch, coach people, collaborate. Where you identify opportunities, don't wait for someone else to act on them. Go forward and act on it. Speak up where you need to speak up. Manage situations, be situationally aware, but be also self-aware, and just help other people grow in that environment.
Good. Now, the other question is in regards to what we are talking about in here, how do we avoid also being overwhelmed in the moment? At times you're overwhelmed. So in regards to just the imposter syndrome topic and all the insights we are giving in here, how do you avoid also being overwhelmed in the moment? Eunice?
Well, I still go back to what Rose said. Emotional intelligence, knowing kujijua, when you know your limits, you're able to ask for help so that then you're not overwhelmed. Just speak up and say, hey, guys, on this one, I am overwhelmed. I need help, because it's normal to get overwhelmed. And just being genuine. And if you are a great team player, people know that when you give it to Lina, it will be delivered. So when Lina says, I am overwhelmed, only I wonder who is this who cannot listen to that? Because Lina always delivers. And now they're not able to do it. So what they need is support. So to avoid being overwhelmed is don't do what Rose said. Don't assume people are angels. To know your mind, to know what you're going through, to keep, don't give them too hard work to start reading your mind. And just speak up when you need to. Yeah.
And I would add that I think what Lina has really touched, what Eunice has really touched on is it's actually, you can say it's credibility, build credibility at the workplace. Yeah. And the credibility has a few components. You can be trusted, you're competent to do your work, and you also have the confidence and someone can count on you. So that way you act your word. So I think I would summarize it also and say, to add to what Eunice has said, build credibility at the workplace. Yeah. So that then it's known that when you're there for the success of the team, you support and they can count on you. Then that way you can also count on the support of everyone around.
A good one. It's like you give first before you receive. What you're expecting maybe your boss to give you, or what you're expecting your team members to do to you, you start it off yourself. I have one last question, and this goes to Lina. How do personality traits such as introversion and extroversion affect the experience and manifestation of imposter syndrome? How do personality traits such as introversion and extroversion affect the experience and manifestation of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, personality can actually affect the manifestation of imposter syndrome. You find that according to someone's personality, they react in a certain way. So there are those who will fight it head on. There are those who will cower. There are those who will leave the task alone and just move on. Yeah. And there are those who are least affected. I doubt there's anyone who does not, who has not gone through imposter syndrome at any point of their lives. But then there are those who will trample on it and just move on. Okay. So you find that some people will be afraid of actually dealing with it, and some people will stand up to it. Personally, as I tell you, like I said earlier, I grew up a very timid girl from Umojawan Estate in Nairobi. And one of the things that I used to be very quiet. I used to be extremely quiet. And I usually joke around and say I learned how to talk when I was in the university, when I became a campus journalist, and I was all over looking for news and everything. But before then, I used to be very, very quiet. And I remember most of the time, my thoughts on anything used to be just within my head, and it will just end there. Okay. But personality changes somehow with the age, and it changes also with the with exposure. So you find that with time, I learned how to talk. I learned how to go out there and fight for things. And I would not say that growing up, that personality never affected me. Like it never came to show, like even in my career life and everything. It actually did. And part of what happened was, as I said, I had not even known there was something like imposter syndrome initially until it actually happened to me. And one of the things is because I learned over time that you have to actually stand up to things. You have to stand up to issues that you face. And that is how I got to now stand up to imposter syndrome and tell myself that, hey, even if I'm facing this thing, it does not mean that I'm now someone who should just lay down and let everybody trample on them. But I need to speak out. I need to come out and face it head on. And the fact that I'm actually here means that I need to be here because I am actually qualified. So yes, personality can actually trigger or even make you so crippled, yeah, on imposter syndrome. And I remember something Eunice saying that for her, when she faced imposter syndrome the first time, I mean, it was like a spur for her. Like the example she gave in her primary school, and she got ahead of people and she actually led a song. Yeah, she did it. Even as much as people made fun of her, I believe she still went on, as she said. If this was me back in the days, I would not even have words coming out of my mouth because I used to be quiet like that. And I would be frozen somewhere there. But then later on, as personality changes with age as well as maturity. Later on, I've learned that I need to actually step up and hit it head on. Yeah, and that's exactly what is happening right now. Yeah.
Okay, and this goes to Eunice. In a team, there is someone who has the constant spirit of helping, but probably because of the work culture, the feeling of stepping on someone else's role and maybe offending the other person might affect them. So how can that situation be handled?
That's a good question, a very interesting question. So you want to help and you fear to step onto somebody's role. Please remember, what do people want? To be seen, to be heard, to be understood. Maybe why they don't want you to step onto their role is because it threatens them. It threatens their presence there. It makes them feel like they're not enough. And therefore, I think it's good to I think step in and ask, where can I help? So that then you don't just come and grab what I was doing and assume I wasn't doing. So just being aware that they want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to be understood, and they want to feel secure that their position is not compromised. So, and then the other thing to ask is, why is all this need that you have to want to do everything while you still have your work? Is that also a need that you have to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood? Are you feeling like when you're not doing it, people are not noticing you? So it's good. That's why self-awareness is important, because you could have all good intentions, but all what you're asking is, guys, see me, I am here, please, and because they're not seeing you, so you step onto taking other people's roles. So it's both way. You need to ask, am I feeling unnoticed? Is that the reason why I want to take on somebody else's role? Because that will make me be seen. And then on the other hand, the person who feels that you're stepping what is it? What is this deep desire they have? Yeah, it's a bit yeah, it's quite something.
Yeah, it is quite something in there because again, it's a balance. Why do you want to do someone else's work? Is it a way of maybe you having your own imposter syndrome, or is it a way of helping someone you feel like they have imposter syndrome? So self-awareness, as Eunice has said, is very important. So there is another issue here of rest. Someone is feeling like women, when we are juggling in about work, maybe being a wife, being a mother, being a sister, and again, you're also a boss. How do you juggle around rest? So someone wants us to talk about rest a little bit. And before I want Rose to answer this, as well as I want to add on a question on rest. After giving all your best, you've given your best, you've shared with us how someone is supposed to handle the boss, how the boss is supposed to handle an employee. So you've given your best as an employee, but there is no reward, no growth. How should you react in such a situation? Rose, to you.
Sorry, I was on mute. Okay. So I think the first question is around not being able to rest because there is so much that one is doing. Right from being a mother, the responsibilities back at home, at work. So I think someone would say, we are all given 24 hours a day, right? And one of the things that I've admired about a lot of the senior leadership I've worked with is you will find a CEO who is able to find time to read books, right? They always say leaders are readers, so they're able to find. They're a CEO or a very senior executive. They're able to read books. They're able to find time to learn a new skill, right? The complexity they are managing around so many stakeholders, the staff in the company, delivering, that achieve. How do they manage it, right? So I think one of the key things that they always tell you is that you have to be deliberate. You have to, don't wait to go in and then you're just wondering, why can't I find time for this? I've been working since morning. I'm yet to finish, and I've not seen my family, my kids. I've not had time to go to the gym. I've not managed to work out the last many days, so my health is really going down. You just have to be deliberate, and deliberate means that you actually think it ahead of time, and you plan and say, for this amount of time, these are the kids. I will work this way. I will have this time to exercise. I will, and different people work very different models, right? You'll find some people who do 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. or 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. They are exercising. After that, they take care of the kids, going to school, for example, if that's the stage, then they are at work. But then for such a person, they have to make sure that they are at home early because they have to sleep early to maintain that rhythm, right? Because when you look at the many needs you have the need to perform at present in all areas, home, work. You also have the need to take care of your health and take care of yourself, because you cannot, like they always say, you cannot draw from an empty vessel, right? You actually have to draw from a vessel that has content and that is full. You need to, you have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of your family. And they always say among the biggest regrets of people late in life, for example, is I worked all the time. I never had time, for example, for my kids, right? It's real, yeah? So I think that being deliberate is very important. That having boundaries, knowing that you could actually overdo any of them is important. And apply strategies that work for you. If, for example, working from home means you work the whole time, then maybe you need to work from the office more time, so that when you're in the office, you're working, and when you say, no, it's the end of working right now, you go home and then you focus at home. So it's no one size fits everyone, but I think the fundamentals remain: be deliberate, define boundaries, define what success looks like for you, and then strive to achieve that successful outcome the way you've actually envisioned. And if you have an issue, there are a lot of coaches these days, right? There are life coaches, there are career coaches, even you have friends who've actually gone through that. Tap into it. I think sometimes we don't like speaking our issues, but so many people have gone that route. You're not the first one. You can get help. So just do it. And sometimes you will get help for a limited period of time, and after that, you're able to run with it. So do anything possible to just set yourself up for success. So that's on the first question, sorry. There was a second question. If you can just tell me very quickly.
The second question was in regards to a toxic boss. You've tried everything, but there is no growth. Nothing is happening. Like there's nothing to motivate you. How do you handle such a situation? Everything we've talked about, you've already put it in practice, but still, after giving all your best, no reward or growth seen. How should one react in such a situation? Can see Eunice is laughing.
Yeah,
you can add on to that also.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it goes back to what we've said. And I think I really liked, other than everything you've worked, I liked what Lena added earlier, which was, for example, that, for example, having that direct conversation. Like, these are my expectations and I'm not getting them. Why? And like Lena said, the outcomes of that can be one of two. It works or it doesn't work. I think it also comes back to what Eunice mentioned at one point. I think we all need to build self-awareness and self-confidence so much that when you're doing your best and you're giving your best and you deserve more, and when you need to do more. And therefore, because at that point in time, when you're that self-aware, you're able to walk away from something and feel like, yes, that was the right decision. Because if you're not that confident at that point, if you, for example, walk away from it, you'll go and then you'll start blaming yourself and wondering, maybe I should have done more, right? So I think when you've done everything, then probably ask yourself, am I in the right place, right? But also being in the right place and building alternative avenues to grow yourself, to earn a living could probably be one of the solutions. But again, tailor it to your situation.
In this case, is quitting an option? In this case, Eunice?
Yeah. I think it is. Eunice?
Okay. Just to add to what Rosa said, number one, if for sure, you've done your best. Now, remember there are two types of imposter syndrome. There's the one when you think too highly of yourself, whereby you think you're really doing it, but it's not, you're not. So in that case, you really need to check, what does doing my best mean? And for me, when I was employed, I always use data. Use data to, when you go do what Lena said, have a direct conversation. When you go for this direct conversation, please do not go with feelings. Because, you may be mistaken to be, emotional and all. This is the moment you sit with yourself, get data to support your best. For example, if you joined, say, for example, you've been here, when you joined, this was the situation in the company. And you have done 1, 2, 3 things. And this is a new position. And this has been my contribution. And they say that you haven't contributed, please leave. Okay? That is the moment God is telling you, this is not your place. However, be careful not to, to go to such a conversation with only, you have nothing to support your claim. So number 2, on the issue of, when do you rest? Number 1, delegate. Delegate what is delegatable. especially women. I think men know how to do this very well. They delegate from home to their wives and their children, and they can focus at work. Now, for us women, we go to work with everything. You're the one cooking and you're in the office. You're the one washing utensils. You're the one taking the kid to school. As in, you carry everything. Delegate what is delegatable. Basically looking at the list of all the things that you do and asking, which one that only me can do? Otherwise, you will never rest. Okay, number 2, learn to say no. I always say no is a complete sentence. It doesn't need to be explained. And as you're doing this, especially at workplace, please remember what Rose said, build credibility first. So that when you say no, people take you seriously. Now, on to you, when you say no, and you've been that kind of a person who is always giving excuses. So please build credibility and trust. Then no is a complete sentence. To be able to say, I am not going to do this. You don't have to explain it if you have done the whole work of building credibility. That's what I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Lina, this is the last question I would like to ask Lina. And the question is, could people be imposting around things they are not interested in? Because I don't like this thing, I impost on it. Could people be imposting around things they are not interested in?
Okay, I think it's a yes and a no. Remember what I said, imposter syndrome could actually be a very positive thing because it's basically your mind's reaction to something that is new. Okay, so if it is something that maybe you don't like, and you found yourself in a situation that you have to do it, then your mind will tell you that, hey, you're not good for this and you're not meant to do this. Okay, but if it is also something that you like, but maybe you've not learned it too well, your mind will also have the same reaction. So yes and no. But of course, the fundamentals remain the same on how to deal with it. Yeah. So it could be something that you don't like, or something that you like, or something that you think you are not good at doing. But the reality remains, anyone can learn anything. Yeah. We can all learn and we can all do something. So look at it also as a learning point, as a point for growth, because when you learn, you actually grow and move to the next level. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining in. It's been such a pleasure to host this meeting. We've learned a lot. There is a comment here, which I think it's a compliment. One thing with Eunice, I can say she's a mountain mover. Her determination is something else. As she's always said, if you make a promise, honor it. And if you make a commitment, achieve it. So in regards to this imposter syndrome, we'll be there, but what promises did you make to yourself? And are you ready to commit to it? Then start one step at a time. That's a comment from one of the listeners in here. So thank you so much, Rose Kemboi. Thank you so much, Eunice Maina. And thank you so much, Lina Jamwa. At this juncture, I want to give each one of you an opportunity just to give us their parting remarks. And I will start with Eunice. Eunice Maina, what are your parting remarks in regards to imposter syndrome?
Yeah, my parting remarks is know who you are, your identity, and don't base your identity on other people or the circumstances around you. And it's more work to find out who am I truly, and it takes time. And be patient with yourself, even as you find this identity that you have. And remember that when God created you, He created you. He says, the Bible says, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. And just knowing that you're unique and special, and you cannot be like anyone else. Therefore, that alone should make you stop comparing yourself with others. And finally, number 3, just learn to say no to the things that you don't want. And it's complete. Thank you.
You're on mute, Elizabeth.
Oh, sorry. Thank you so much, Eunice. Rose Kemboi, your parting shot. Rose, you're on mute. Kindly unmute.
My sincere apologies. Sorry about that. So I was saying that my parting shot, I'll requote this lady who researched on growth mindset and on imposter syndrome. She said, the view you adopt for yourself profoundly affects the way you lead your life. And on that note, I say practice self-awareness. Also be self-compassionate, have self-compassion, love yourself, acknowledge yourself, and be gentle with yourself. Only that way can you sustain your growth momentum, and you can then develop yourself, and you can then have a lot to give or to offer to the world. So don't let imposter syndrome hold you down. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rose. Lina Jamwa, what are your parting shots?
Okay, mine are 3 things. Number 1, step out of your mind and into the reality. Imposter syndrome is basically in your mind. So step out of that and live in the present and in the reality of who you are and what you're able to do, what God has put in your hands. Number 2, fear nothing. I've read this book, The 50th Law by 50 Cent and Robert Greene. And one of the things that really stand out to me is the lack of fear for anything. 50 Cent, the way he goes through his life, he negotiates his deals, he does everything that he does. He's very strategic and very systematic, and he harbors no fear. He's had his failures, but he goes on, and still just conquers everything. Number 3, keep on moving. Regardless of the fact that you may have experienced imposter syndrome, always remember it is not you alone who has experienced it. Research has it. Rose told us 70% of people have experienced it. KPMG did another research that showed that 75% of the women in executive positions have experienced imposter syndrome at any one point. So remember, it is not unique to you, but it is conquerable. So keep on moving, step over it and go. Just go, go, go without looking back. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the parting shots, such wonderful insights in there. I want to make an announcement that you will have our next webinar on the 17th of June, 2024. It will be on a Monday, and this should be a Monday holiday. So we will share the timings and the speakers on our LinkedIn page, that is Zion Pearl Publisher's LinkedIn page, specifically on the SheLeads project. So keep on checking our pages. Again, all these ladies who have shared their insights in here, they've written a chapter in the SheLeads book, and you can get the books from the Zion Pearl Publishers page again. So feel free to get in touch to us. The next webinar will talk about beliefs and leadership effectiveness. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining in. Allow me close the meeting now. You're free to leave at your own time. And thank you so much, Eunice Maina. Thank you so much, Rose Kemboi. Thank you so much, Lina Jama, for putting in and pouring your hearts towards making us understand imposter syndrome and how to handle it. Asanteni sana. Have a nice evening.
Thank you too, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.
Welcome. Bye-bye.